The North Melbourne Kangaroos, a team rich with history, cult heroes and adoring fans. North Melbourne has been a team that has had periodical success. Fans enjoyed successful periods throughout the 70s and the mid to late 90s. Anthony Stevens, John Longmire, Glenn Archer and Wayne Carey, as well as coach Dennis Pagan. All legends of the club that helped create a winning culture and played an electric surge forward game style and gritty defense that allowed them to win premierships in 1996 and 1999, as well as play in a losing grand final in 1998.
It's a remarkable performance by this team. They finished the 20th century as the team to beat in the new millennium. As the time ticks down and the Kangas have won a fourth premiership. Well done, Dennis Pagan.
After winning their second premiership in 4 seasons, it was only right to assume that North Melbourne would continue the success well into the 2000s. Wayne Carey, a man that many would consider the greatest player that they have ever seen play, was only 28 years old, an age that would make him in his prime, as well as other instrumental players such as Archer and Stevens being 26 and 28 years old respectively. This team looked ready to enter the new millennium as perennial contenders. But this hope of being a superstar team never came to be. North Melbourne actually started the millennium off well, finishing 4th with a record of 14-8. However, the final series provided more negatives than positives. The Kangaroos were beaten by a staggering 125 points to the eventual premiers Essendon, a team that was a powerhouse in its own right. The Roos would rally back and beat the 8th placed Hawthorn in the semi before getting beaten by 50 points to the Melbourne Demons in the prelim. This would turn out to be the beginning of an up and down period for North Melbourne, finishing in the bottom 4 in 2001 before yo-yoing between 4th and 14th place on the ladder over the next 12 seasons. Throughout this time, the Kangaroos went through a passing of the guard, with the players from their premiership squads retiring or being traded. With the old stars moving on, new pillars began to take shape. Robert Harvey went from the young, speedy kid to a genuine out-and-out superstar of the competition, coming runner-up in the Brownlow in 2007. Jack Ziebell was a promising young prospect who was declared a superstar in the making by then-coach Danny Laidley. Todd Goldstein was beginning to find his feet as an AFL star-level ruckman, and Drew Petrie was a versatile player who was used at centre-half forward, defence and ruck. Danny Laidley took over from Dennis Pagan as coach before resigning himself in 2009. North would then take a punt on Brad Scott, the once fearless defender that contributed to 2 of the Lions premierships during the three-peat. However, Brad was only 33 at the time, which was quite young for a coach. Being a young rookie coach had its downs, including losing his second game by 104 points to St Kilda. But over the season, Scott was able to implement his system and the results soon began to show. Brad Scott talked about losing results being a positive towards the development of his young North Melbourne squad. During a 2011 game against St Kilda, the Roos found themselves down 19 points heading into the 4th quarter. North spent the entire last quarter peppering away inside the 50. In response, St Kilda parked countless loose men behind the ball. It led to the bizarre spectacle of no Saints players forward of the defensive 50 for minutes at a time. They would kick 1 goal for the quarter and they'd go on to lose the game. Brad Scott would say, "We really felt that if we attacked enough, the damn wall would break and we'd be able to score. We had enough shots at goal to win the game, but we missed them." Again, it was a harsh lesson, but a good lesson. These lessons would begin to formulate into wins quickly in 2012. The veteran players such as Boomer, Michael Ferrito, Daniel Wells and Andrew Swallow were instrumental mentors to the younger players, who were now firmly acclimated to the AFL life. Last season, we'd beaten the sides that were around about where we were, but we really wanted to attack the good sides and show our best football was capable of competing with the best. The next 2 months were marred by inconsistency, but the second half of 2012 produced some of the best football seen at Arden Street in many, many years. 10 wins in 12 games took the football world by storm and sent North rocketing up the ladder. Internally, Scott was focused on keeping the players list level-headed, not buying into the hype. Although the 2012 season ended at the hands of the West Coast Eagles by 96 points, it was evident that Brad Scott's game plan could potentially produce winning footy in September. And after an unfortunate 2013 season, where 10 of their losses were by 16 points or less, the Roos were ready to show the footballing world what they could do. Brad Scott, who was soon to coach his 100th game during the upcoming 2014 season, looked to add some vital inclusions to help the young North side win those close games and instill the shinboner spirit of old. Nick Del Santo was that vital inclusion, and what an inclusion he was. After St Kilda declined to match North Melbourne's 3-year bid, Del Santo made an immediate impact at Arden Street. His classy play style through the guts was welcomed by the team. Del Santo played every game during the season, and he was dubbed Recruit of the Year by AFL Media. But it wasn't just Del Santo that were the stars for the season. Drew Petrie kicked 50 goals during 2014, cementing himself as a premier forward of the competition. Lindsay Thomas added 45 goals of his own. Boomer Harvey, Levi Greenwood and Sam Gibson combined for 75 disposals a game between them. And Scott Thompson and Michael Frito were stalwarts in defence. The Kangaroos had a balance of good defence and good offence, scoring over 2,000 points for the year and having a top 5 defence. Just 2 years prior, Scott talked about wanting to show that North Melbourne's best football was capable of beating the best. During the 2014 season, North beat both of the previous grand finalists, as well as Sydney at the SCG. They finished 6th for the season, with 14 wins and 8 losses, and looked primed to shock the world. And shock the world they did. Elimination final versus Essendon, the team that whopped them by 125 points 14 years earlier. Essendon started the game strongly, kicking the first 2 goals before Del Santo and Greenwood replied with goals of their own. But unfortunately for the Roos, those were the only 2 goals that they kicked for the half. Essendon, on the other hand, flexed their muscles and got out to a 27-point lead at halftime. The game looked to be getting away from the Roos, but in the face of adversity, Brad Scott shuffled the Magnets. Despite having one more forward 50 entry than Essendon at halftime, they had only 6 shots to 13. Scott made several forward changes to open the 50 up around Drew Petrie, pushing Ben Brown up the field in an effort to keep Petrie deep. And it worked. After Essendon kicked the first goal of the third quarter, ballooning the lead out to 33 points, the boys from Arden Street kicked 12 of the next 17 goals in the match to win the game by 12 points. Petrie was incredible in the second half, kicking 2 goals, including a last quarter goal that provided the AFL with an iconic celebration. Ben Brown, who was playing his 9th game of AFL footy, stepped up mightily, kicking 4 goals in the second half, as well as Lindsay Thomas, who contributed 3 goals himself. The Roos would go on to play Geelong in the semi-final, a chance at redemption after losing to them in 2007, and a chance at family bragging rights between the Scott brothers. The Cats were seen as the favourites heading into the game, and in front of 65,000 at the MCG, the 2 teams put on a game for the ages. The Roos continued the strong forward play that they had displayed against the Bombers, kicking 7 goals in the first quarter. They would kick 2 further goals in the second quarter to go up by 24 points at the half. North Melbourne continued this strong play into the fourth quarter, where they managed to get themselves a 32-point lead at the 14-minute mark of the final term, before everything started to capitulate. The Kangaroos did their best Essendon impression from the week before, and allowed the Cats to kick the next 4 goals to bring the margin back to a singular goal. Brad Scott began to shuffle the Magnets, bring everyone back to defence, and luckily for them, it worked. With less than 30 seconds on the clock, the Cats surged forward, only to be intercepted by Todd Goldstein, who took a huge pack mark to hold back the Cats. Petrie and Thomas continued their incredible finals form, kicking 4 and 3 goals respectively, while Sam Butler and Del Santo both had 35 disposals. Brent Harvey returned from his 3-game suspension to have 25 touches and was a key contributor. Incredibly, the boys from Arden Street were 1 game away from a grand final. They would be going up against the Sydney Swans, who were premiers only 2 seasons prior and added the greatest full forward of our generation in Lance Franklin. The Swans were heavily favoured, with many expecting the Swans to be in the grand final since the beginning of the season. No one expected North to be anywhere close to one. I wish I could say that North Melbourne continued their incredible finals run, making it to the 2014 grand final. But alas, it was not meant to be. Buddy, Kurt Tippett, Adam Goods and Luke Parker combined for 15 goals as North's defence was torn apart. Petrie and Thomas, who had both kicked 6 goals in the finals at that point, were held goalless for the game, and the Roos were beaten by 71 points. Brad Scott would say, "We didn't execute what we wanted to do at the best of our abilities, but there's a suspicion that even if we did, we were outclassed." Despite this, many would say that the Roos surpassed expectations for the season, and Scott and the crew looked to build off of this. North looked to bring in firepower during the 2014 free agency, and firepower they got. Jared Waite was brought in to help Petrie and an emerging Ben Brown in the forward line, as well as Sean Higgins being brought in to help out the forward line and midfield, that was soon to move on from an aging Brent Harvey. This new approach of bringing in proven stars rather than building through the draft was questioned by the media, who questioned what the team would look like once the older players such as Harvey and Petrie retire. Brad Scott backed their approach, claiming that North Melbourne is not topping up his list to try and win a premiership before the star veterans retire, and that their flag window won't close once the older players retire. The Roos went into the 2015 season with the second oldest list in the league, and while they didn't want to admit it, the window was slowly closing. Despite bringing in Waite, who kicked a career-high 42 goals for the season, and Higgins, who averaged 20 disposals and kicked 39 goals, the Roos slightly declined on the season. Players such as Petrie and Harvey couldn't reproduce the numbers of last season, and key players such as Daniel Wells and Nick Del Santo missed games due to injury. North Melbourne finished 8th with a record of 13-9. They recorded over 2,000 points once again, which was top 5 in the league, but regressed in their defensive stats, finishing with the 7th worst defence in the league. Despite this, the boys from Arden Street looked to September to show their true colours once again. A Sunday Arvo game against the Richmond Tigers, who were looking to prove themselves in their own right. Inaccuracy killed the Roos early, kicking 1 goal 6 in the first quarter, and the Tigers surged in the second, kicking 7 goals straight. North kicked 5 of their own in the second, but they were still down by 13 heading into the break. The third quarter was fairly even from both teams, before North Melbourne took control and led by 4 to end the quarter. The experience of last season's finals proved to be beneficial for the Roos, who used the experience to run away with the game in the final quarter, winning 105-88. Big recruit Jared Waite was influential, kicking 4 goals, and 37-year-old Boomer was still doing Boomer things, recording 31 disposals and 2 goals. The reward for winning? A date with the Sydney Swans, a rematch of last year's preliminary final, and a chance to make up for the loss. The contest was a Kangaroo fan's dream. They led at every break and kicked 4 goals in the final quarter to put the Swans away in front of their home crowd. The Roos won by 26 points. They dominated the clearances and contested possessions, which was proving to be the pillars of their wins, having won 11 of 12 games when they won those stats during the season. Waite continued his fine form, kicking 3, and despite Boomer being kept quiet, Del Santo, Cunnington and Higgins stepped up, combining for 86 disposals. Once again, North Melbourne found themselves a game away from the grand final. Would they use the experience that they had gained from last season to help them get over the hump this time? It certainly seems so. Despite a stalemate for the first 11 minutes of the game, North Melbourne will kick 3 goals 4 to the Eagles' 2 behinds to lead the first break by 20 points. The boys could see 1 foot through the door to the granny. Just 3 more quarters of this and they're through. Now in an ideal world, North Melbourne did this, but the reality is they couldn't finish the job. Despite poor kicking from West Coast, the constant pressure was too much for the Kangas, and they went out valiantly after halftime, losing by 25 points. To sound like a broken record, Jared Waite, who had kicked 7 goals in 2 games, was held goalless, and many players didn't step up when they needed to. 2 prelim finals, 2 chances gone begging. The story of the post-2015 North Melbourne Kangaroos is grim. Despite making finals in 2016, they were swiftly eliminated by the Adelaide Crows in what would turn out to be the final game of 4 club legends. Prior to the 2016 finals, Brad Scott informed Brent Harvey, Drew Petrie, Michael Ferrito and Nick Del Santo that they will not be offered a new contract for the 2017 season. Brad Scott would say that the decision has been made with the best interests of the football club at heart. If 2017 was going to be the last year on Earth, we know those 4 boys would make a contribution to us. But the future is longer than that, and we needed to make this decision in the best interests of North Melbourne's future. This was understandably faced with lots of criticism. It was unclear what direction North Melbourne were going, considering their strong stance on signing older players in previous free agencies. Yet, now it was evident that the club had decided they couldn't go any further than they have, that they have gotten the most out of their players and needed to look to the future. Suddenly, the club was stripped of leadership, experience, and competitiveness in one hit, abruptly pressing the reset button. The club found itself caught between generations as it attempted to bridge the gap between the past and the future. With the older core fading out, the likes of Jack Siebel, Ben Cunnington, Todd Goldstein and Ben Brown were thrust into major leadership roles, expected to carry the side forward. At the same time, North experimented with younger players to blend into the group, but too many of those recruits failed to meet the standard required to push the Roos back into contention. The results reflected this imbalance. In 2017, North Melbourne managed just 6 wins and landed in the bottom 4. And since the 2018 season, the club has been stuck in the bottom 8. Between 2020 and 2024, they slumped to the bottom 2 4 times and collected 2 wooden spoons along the way. Throughout this period, the Roos were constantly linked with a so-called war chest of salary cap space, ready to land a superstar recruit to change their fortunes. But despite chasing big names like Dustin Martin, Josh Kelly and Andrew Gaff, the club missed out each time. Left stranded in no man's land, North weren't good enough to contend, the younger crop wasn't strong enough to carry the load, and they compounded the problem by trading away valuable draft picks for underperforming players such as Jared Pollock. The successful blend of veterans and youth that carried them to the preliminary finals in 2014 and 2015 could not be replicated. Coaching instability added to the turmoil. Brad Scott's departure in 2019 was followed by a revolving door in the coach's box, with 4 different senior coaches leading the side over just a few years. The lack of continuity only deepened the club's struggles on and off the field. However, the tide finally seems to be turning in 2025. A string of smart draft selections and the arrival of key veteran leaders, combined with the appointment of a coach who has restored direction and belief, has given the Arden Street faithful renewed hope. After years in the wilderness, the Roo boys are looking to rise again, with a dream of not just returning to finals, but going one further than the prelim teams of 2014 and 2015.